15 black celebrities who used death to free themselves. He donated his brain to science, to help researchers understand the devastating effects of concussions. But the tragedy that followed left the world in shock. The former All-Pro safety took his own life with a gunshot to the chest. Just like Don Cornelius, the legendary creator of Soul Train, who ended his life one quiet morning at his Los Angeles home. Suicide is never an easy choice. Yet for some, it becomes the only escape when every other door has been slammed shut. This heartbreaking reality doesn't just haunt ordinary people. It has claimed the lives of black legends who once stood at the very top of fame. Adored by millions, yet tormented by pain no one else could truly see. What drove them to the edge? Was it the relentless pressure of the spotlight? The silent wounds of racism? Or the crushing loneliness that even the brightest stage lights couldn't chase away? Tonight, we uncover the tragic stories of 15 black celebrities whose brilliance lit up the world, until their inner darkness consumed them. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway, a man whose voice could move souls, yet whose own pain went unheard. In the 1970s, Hathaway stood as one of soul music's purest geniuses, a voice drenched in emotion, timeless, hauntingly beautiful. Songs like The Ghetto and his Grammy-nominated duet with Roberta Flack, The Closer I Get to You, made him a legend. But behind the velvet tone and flawless harmonies hid a tortured spirit, a man fighting a war no one else could see. Hathaway battled schizophrenia, a cruel and unrelenting illness that offered little hope in an era with few effective treatments. For a black artist in the public eye, that fight was even heavier. His brilliance filled stages and airwaves, but his silence was deafening. He carried his pain like a secret, even from those who loved him most. On January 13, 1979, the facade cracked. After a recording session with Roberta Flack in New York, Hathaway abruptly left, saying he needed some air. He returned to his 15th-floor suite at the Essex House Hotel. Hours later, the night was shattered by a single, chilling sound, a crash that echoed through the city streets. Donny Hathaway's body lay motionless on the pavement below. Police called it suicide. Inside his room, a window pane had been carefully removed, as if he had planned his final, irreversible act. But his family and friends refused to believe it. They clung to the hope that it was an accident, unable to accept that the man whose music healed others could not save himself. Few knew how deep his suffering truly ran. Years spent in and out of psychiatric hospitals, swallowed by loneliness, surrounded by white walls and fluorescent lights. Each time, he carried one thing with him, a photograph of his wife and 2 daughters. Their smiles were his lifeline, his reason to keep fighting the darkness. Donny Hathaway never let the world see his pain. He bore it quietly until the weight became too much to carry. His story isn't just one of tragedy. It's a mirror reflecting the silent struggle of countless others battling mental illness in the shadows, trying to survive while protecting the people they love from a truth too heavy to bear. Don Cornelius, the tragic end of a trailblazer. Don Cornelius wasn't just a television host. He was a visionary who changed the rhythm of American culture. As the mastermind behind Soul Train, Cornelius didn't just bring music to TV. He brought black excellence to the living rooms of millions. From 1971 onward, he turned Saturday mornings into a celebration of soul, funk, and freedom, giving black artists the stage they had long been denied. He was more than a host. He was a symbol of pride, progress, and power for an entire generation. But behind the smooth voice and polished smile, Don Cornelius was fighting a silent war no one could see. On the morning of February 1st, 2012, in his luxurious Sherman Oaks home, the man who once introduced joy to the world sat alone in the dim glow of his living room. An unfinished bottle of liquor stood beside an overturned pill container, haunting symbols of a battle that had long been lost inside his mind. His pain, deep, relentless, and unseen, guided his trembling hand toward a .38 caliber revolver. Before the final act, he picked up his landline and dialed his son, Tony Cornelius. On the other end, there were no words, just heavy breathing, shallow gasps, and a silence so raw it felt like a final cry for help. The call lasted only 13 seconds before it cut off. Moments later, a single gunshot shattered the quiet. The man who once brought life to the screen now lay motionless, surrounded by the fragments of a life once filled with rhythm and light. Years before his death, Cornelius had undergone traumatic brain surgery following a serious medical condition that left him in constant pain. That pain became his prison, a daily torment that blurred the line between body and soul. The toll of his illness, combined with lingering wounds from a turbulent marriage and a domestic dispute in 2009, weighed heavily on him. Those close to him saw the change, the weariness in his eyes, the dimming of his once boundless energy. In the end, Don Cornelius, the man who gave Black America a stage, a sound, and a sense of pride, became a victim of the very darkness he once helped others dance away from. His passing wasn't just the loss of a legend. It was a painful reminder of the quiet mental battles so many suffer in silence. Even the brightest lights can fade when the weight of pain grows too heavy to bear. Phyllis Hyman, when beauty became a burden. They called her the diva of soul and jazz, a woman whose very presence could silence a room. In the 1970s and 80s, Phyllis Hyman wasn't just a voice, she was an experience. With songs like You Know How to Love Me, she carved her name among legends. Standing a striking 6'1", she was elegance personified, a symbol of Black grace, power, and raw emotion. From Broadway lights to recording studios, her talent was undeniable. But behind that beauty, behind the applause, something inside her was breaking. On June 30th, 1995, just hours before she was to perform at the legendary Apollo Theater, cruel words echoed through the halls. Someone had mocked her weight. To others, it was a passing comment. To Phyllis, it cut deep, reopening wounds carved by years of silent battles. Alone in her dimly lit dressing room, she sat before the mirror, staring at a reflection she no longer recognized. The pressure to stay flawless, to be everything the world demanded, had become unbearable. She opened a drawer, took out a bottle of sleeping pills, and let the tiny capsules tumble into her palm. With one last sip of water, she swallowed them, her thoughts lingering on the stage she'd never walk again. As the pills took hold, her body trembled, then fell still. The note she left behind was heartbreakingly simple. I'm tired. I'm really tired. For years, Phyllis had fought battles the public never saw, with depression, self-doubt, and body image in an industry that idolized perfection but ignored pain. The sedatives that once helped her sleep soon took her spark, causing weight gain and deepening despair. In a world that rarely offered grace to Black women, especially those struggling with mental health, Phyllis carried her pain in silence until it became too heavy to bear. Her death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning, a reminder of the unseen toll fame can take, and how beauty, once a gift, can become a prison. Yet even in her final silence, Phyllis Hyman's voice refuses to fade. Her songs still echo through time, urging the world to listen, not just to the music, but to the pain behind it. She was more than a diva. She was a woman who deserved to be loved, not for her perfection, but for her soul. Freddie Prinze, a star shattered by rejection. Freddie Prinze was more than just a rising star of the 1970s. He was a cultural force. With his breakout role in Chico and the Man, Freddie became one of the first Latino entertainers to conquer American television. To millions, he was a symbol of hope, charm, and laughter, proof that talent could break barriers. But behind that radiant smile, the applause was fading into silence. By January 29, 1977, the man who once lit up every room sat alone in his Los Angeles apartment, drowning in despair. The fame, the fans, the laughter, none of it could quiet the pain eating away at his soul. Desperate for comfort, he reached out, calling his ex-wife, Kathy, and a few close friends, searching for someone to pull him back from the edge. But when Kathy's voice came through the line, distant and resigned, her words cut deep. "Freddie, you have to get through this on your own. I can't be your crutch forever." That sentence, cold, final, was the breaking point. The last fragile thread holding him together snapped. The spotlight that once celebrated him now cast only shadows. Staring into the mirror, he saw a stranger, a man consumed by rejection, pressure, and unbearable solitude. In one final, desperate act, Freddie reached for his .32 caliber pistol. The only escape he believed was left. As the trigger clicked and the sound echoed through the night, fleeting images of Kathy, laughter, and better days flashed before his eyes. His death sent shockwaves through Hollywood. How could someone so young, so gifted, vanish so suddenly? But behind the grief lay a haunting truth, that fame can illuminate a person's face while leaving their soul in darkness. Freddie's light burned bright, but far too briefly. When it went out, it left behind more than sorrow. It left a question that still lingers today. How many stars must fall before Hollywood learns to see their pain? Dave Durson, the silent battle that no one saw coming. Dave Durson was once the pride of the NFL, a powerhouse on the field, a man who hit hard, led fearlessly, and helped drive the Chicago Bears to Super Bowl glory in the 1980s. With his talent, discipline, and unshakable will, Dave became more than a player. He was a symbol of strength, a hero to fans who admired his courage every time he stepped onto the gridiron. Even after the cheering stopped, football still defined him. He fought for players' rights, standing up for those who had sacrificed their bodies and mind for the game they loved. But behind the awards, the applause, and the legacy of victory, there was a darker truth, a silent war raging inside his own head. It wasn't an opponent he could tackle or out-train. It was something invisible, unstoppable. On February 17th, 2011, in a quiet Florida apartment, Dave sat alone in the dim light of his final night. On the table before him lay a handwritten note, steady, deliberate. In it, he made a haunting request that his brain be donated to the NFL Brain Bank to study chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CT, the degenerative brain disease he believed was destroying him from within. When he lifted the gun, Dave didn't aim at his head. Instead, he placed it over his chest, over the heart that had fueled his entire life, ensuring that his brain, his final gift to science, would remain intact. The shot echoed through the silence, ending his life but preserving his message. When police arrived, they found his letter beside him. Not a goodbye, but a warning. A plea for the world to understand what repeated head trauma was doing to athletes. In death, Dave Durson became more than a champion. He became a symbol, a voice for the voiceless, a sacrifice that forced the sports world to confront the hidden cost of glory. His story still echoes today, a chilling reminder that the hardest battles aren't always fought on the field, but within the mind. Andre Waters, the hidden cost of a warrior's battle. Andre "Dirty" Waters was a force of nature on the NFL field, fearless, brutal, and unbreakable. Wearing the Philadelphia Eagles uniform through the 1980s and 1990s, he became the embodiment of raw, aggressive defense. Every hit echoed through the stadium like thunder, every tackle a message. You don't run through dirty waters. But behind that armor of toughness hid a devastating truth, the unseen damage of hundreds of violent collisions. On November 20th, 2006, in a silent, empty Florida stadium, Andre Waters returned to the battleground one last time. There were no fans, no teammates, no cameras. Just a man alone with his memories. He climbed the bleachers slowly, his mind flashing back to the glory days, the roars, the lights, the adrenaline. But those sounds have been replaced by something darker. Pounding headaches, dizzy spells, confusion that grew sharper with each passing year. The game that had made him a hero had also taken everything from him. His clarity, his peace, his sense of self. Standing at the 50-yard line, where he had once stood like a wall of iron, Waters knelt down. This time, There was no football in his hands, only a handgun. He gazed at the faint white lines on the turf, the ghostly marks of his past, and in one tragic moment, he pulled the trigger. The autopsy revealed what many had feared. Andre Waters suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. The same diagnosis would later be found in other fallen NFL warriors like Dave Durson, who met a similar fate. For years, the NFL glorified those bone-crushing hits that made the sport legendary. But Waters' death forced the world to face the truth. Those hits didn't just end careers, they ended lives. Andre Waters was once celebrated as a fearless gladiator who gave everything for the game he loved. In the end, that same game took from him what no opponent ever could: his mind, his peace, and ultimately his life. Lee Thompson-Young, Disney's bright star and his silent battle. Lee Thompson-Young wasn't just another Disney face. He was the face. The charming hero of the famous Jet Jackson, whose smile could light up any room and whose eyes carried a spark of adventure that millions of young fans adored. On screen, he was fearless, joyful, and alive. Off-screen, though, a storm was quietly brewing, one that no one could see coming. On August 19, 2013, inside a modest Los Angeles apartment, the world of that once radiant young man came to a heartbreaking stop. Lee walked into his small office, a space littered with old scripts and faded memories. Photographs lay face down on his desk, as if he could no longer bear to look at the life he once lived. His eyes wandered to a bookshelf lined with trophies, framed smiles from his Disney days, and a jacket from Rizzoli and Isles. Once symbols of pride, now painful reminders of loneliness. With trembling hands, he opened a drawer and pulled out a bottle of pills. A sigh escaped his lips, long, tired, almost like a whisper goodbye. One by one, he swallowed them, hoping to silence the noise inside his mind. When his breathing slowed, he leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling, until the world faded away. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood. How could someone so bright, so full of promise, meet such a devastating end? It was only after his passing that the truth emerged. For years, Lee had been fighting a private war against depression, anxiety, and an unshakable sense of emptiness. Behind the smiles and red carpets was a young man drowning in silence, terrified to let anyone see the pain beneath his perfection. His family, shattered by grief, made a brave choice to speak out. They shared his struggle not to sensationalize it, but to help others see what so often goes unseen. Their message was clear: even the happiest faces can hide the deepest wounds. Sometimes a simple conversation, a kind word, a check-in can change everything. It can even save a life. Chris Lighty, the controversial tragedy of a music titan. Chris Lighty wasn't just a music manager. He was a visionary, a powerhouse who stood behind some of hip-hop's biggest legends: 50 Cent, Missy Elliott, LL Cool J, and countless others. He was the man who turned raw street ambition into global superstardom. Lighty didn't just guide artists, he built empires. But while he helped others rise to greatness, he couldn't escape the shadows closing in on his own life. On August 30th, 2012, the Bronx summer heat carried a haunting stillness. Moments earlier, a heated argument with his wife had shattered the peace. Voices clashing, pain spilling into the open. Then came silence. Chris stepped into the backyard, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. In his trembling hand, a gun, cold and unrelenting. The sun glared down, stretching his shadow across the ground, a reflection of the darkness within him. His eyes, weary and hollow, told the story of a man who had carried everyone's burdens but his own. For years, he had been the architect of success, the one who lifted others to the top. Yet, in that final moment, he stood powerless to save himself. With one shaky breath, he raised the gun to his temple. Time froze. Then, a single gunshot echoed through the air. Sharp, final, the sound of a soul breaking free from unbearable pain. News of his death sent shockwaves across the industry. Headlines screamed of a $5 million IRS debt, painting a picture of financial ruin and despair. But those who truly knew Chris refused to believe that money alone had driven him to the edge. His closest friends hired private investigators, desperate for answers, convinced the story ran deeper. To them, Chris Lighty wasn't a man defeated by debt. He was a fighter, a survivor of the ruthless music business. They believed his pain came not from dollars owed, but from wounds unseen. The loneliness that shadows fading fame, the heartbreak of a fractured marriage, and the silent war waged inside his own mind. That single gunshot wasn't just an ending, it was a mystery, a secret buried with him, leaving behind not only grief, but an unsettling question that still echoes through hip-hop today. Was Chris Lighty's death a tragedy of circumstance, or the untold truth of a man consumed by his own success? Jean-Michel Basquiat, the million-dollar painter who joined the 27 Club. Jean-Michel Basquiat was a fire that burned too bright, too fast. A prodigy of the neo-expressionist movement, he transformed from an anonymous graffiti artist tagging the walls of New York to one of the most celebrated painters of the 20th century. His art, raw, chaotic, and electrifying, spoke of race, power, pain, and identity in a language only his soul could translate. Basquiat's meteoric rise drew him into the orbit of legends like Andy Warhol, and together they redefined what art could be. His canvases, once dismissed as street scrawl, are now worth tens of millions. Visual testaments to a genius who saw beauty in madness. But behind the acclaim and glamour, Basquiat wrestled with inner demons. Fame brought isolation. Success amplified his pain. On August 12, 1988, at just 27 years old, Basquiat was found lifeless in his New York loft, surrounded by unfinished paintings, each one echoing his torment. He had injected a fatal dose of heroin. The brush slipped from his fingers, his heart stilled, and the world lost a visionary voice. His death placed him among the tragic legends of the 27 Club, artists like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Kurt Cobain, whose brilliance burned out too soon. In hindsight, Basquiat's final works felt hauntingly prophetic, filled with shadows, crowns, and cryptic symbols that seemed to foretell his end. Publications like The Guardian and Vanity Fair later peeled back the layers of his story, revealing a man haunted by loneliness despite his fame. His studio, once a temple of creation, became the silent witness to a tortured genius's final moments. Basquiat wasn't just a millionaire painter. He was a mirror of the human condition, a reminder that genius and despair often walk hand in hand. Even now, decades later, his art still speaks, loud, raw, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Richard Pryor, the tragic fire behind the laughter. Richard Pryor wasn't just a comedian. He was a revolution. With razor-sharp wit and fearless honesty, he turned pain into punchlines and truth into thunder. On stage, he made the world roar with laughter. But off stage, that laughter faded into a darkness only he could see. His life was a storm of genius and self-destruction, fame and fire, literally. On the night of June 9th, 1980, inside his Los Angeles home, there were no cameras, no applause, just silence. Richard sat alone, cigarette smoke swirling around him, a half-empty bottle of rum slipping from his hand. In the other, a lighter flickered, and then flames. In seconds, his body became a torch, his screams echoing through the night as he stumbled into the street, skin ablaze, eyes filled with unbearable despair. His wife, Jennifer, would later say it looked as if he'd already surrendered, as if this was the ending he'd been chasing all along. Richard survived that inferno, but it was more than an accident. It was a warning, a glimpse into the unraveling of a tortured genius. He lived another 25 years, officially passing from multiple sclerosis in 2005. Yet for those who truly knew him, the question lingered. Was it the disease that took him, or the slow burn of a man consumed by his own demons? The fire didn't just scar his body, it branded his soul. It became a prophecy of a legend torn between laughter and pain, a man who made the world laugh louder than anyone, while secretly searching for one reason, just one, to keep on living. Max Robinson, the black journalist who chose silence amid crisis. Max Robinson broke barriers as the first black anchor on ABC World News Tonight. He was a pioneer, a man whose voice once carried authority and pride into millions of homes. But in the end, that same voice was swallowed by silence. On December 20th, 1988, inside a dim Washington, D.C. apartment, Robinson sat alone at his desk. A single lamp flickered, its weak glow carving shadows across his weary face. Before him lay a suicide note, the handwriting uneven, desperate, a final confession from a man crushed beneath illness, exhaustion, and the cold indifference of a society that had once cheered his rise. Around him were the remnants of a different time. Faded photographs, old press clippings, reminders of when he was the face of progress. Confident, radiant, unstoppable. But those days had faded into echoes. His hand trembled as he reached for a glass of water. It slipped, shattering, blurring the words he had just written. A cough tore through his frail body, the cruel sound of the disease consuming him. AIDS, the silent executioner of his generation. Robinson knew there was no miracle waiting for him. He could fight, but for what? Outside, the world whispered. His illness became gossip. His suffering became spectacle. America had celebrated his talent, but refused to see his pain. Not when he was strong, and certainly not now, when he was broken. He closed his eyes, not in fear, not in panic, but in quiet surrender. No gun, no pills, no violence. Just a slow, fading breath. The dimming of a flame that once lit the truth for others. Max Robinson's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a haunting reflection of a society that turns its back on the very heroes it once applauded, leaving them to disappear, unheard, in the darkness they once helped to illuminate. Marvin Gaye, a tragic liberation. Marvin Gaye, the legendary voice behind What's Going On, was more than a soul music icon. He was a messenger, a poet who turned pain, struggle, and hope into sound. His songs carried the heartbeat of a nation in turmoil. Yet behind the curtain of fame, Marvin was fighting battles no melody could heal. On April 1st, 1984, that inner war reached its devastating end. Inside his parents' Los Angeles home, a heated argument with his father spiraled into tragedy. Marvin stood still, silent, unarmed, as Marvin Sr. lifted a gun. 2 gunshots echoed through the house. The bullets struck his chest. He fell, his breath fading, but his face, eerily calm, seemed to say he had finally found peace. To the world, his death was murder. But to many who knew his torment, it felt like something deeper, a surrender. After years of depression, paranoia, and searching for redemption, some believe Marvin himself had set the stage for that fatal moment. The bloodstained room, where he took his last breath, became more than a crime scene. It became a symbol, a haunting reminder of genius devoured by its own pain. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack, a past of relentless pain. Bobby Womack was a soul and R&B legend whose raw, aching voice could move generations. Yet he could never mend the wounds of his own heart. On the quiet night of June 27, 2014, inside his Los Angeles home, Womack sat alone, motionless, a bottle of pills trembling in his hand. The white tablets shimmered beneath the dim glow of a bedside lamp, reflecting the sorrow in his hollow eyes. His fingers clutched the cap as if holding on to life itself. But one by one, the pills slipped past his lips, each one dissolving into the darkness of memory. Images from his past came flooding back. His brother, gunned down, 2 children, lost to tragedy, a marriage haunted by the ghost of Sam Cooke. The bottle fell from his grasp, its soft rattle echoing through the silence of the room. His breathing slowed. His body surrendered to the stillness. As if at last he had found the peace that music could no longer bring. No official cause was ever confirmed, but those closest to him knew the truth. Depression, illness, An unbearable loneliness had finally overtaken a spirit too fragile, too soulful, and perhaps too human for this world. Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath, a woman haunted by double pain. Behind her brilliant poetry and the timeless masterpiece The Bell Jar lived a fragile soul, carrying wounds too deep for the world to see. Her words cut like glass, sharp, beautiful, and full of ache, but they were only fragments of the torment within. On the freezing morning of February 11th, 1963, in a quiet London apartment, Sylvia woke before dawn. She slipped on her worn robe, her movements calm, almost ritualistic. The hallway was dim, her footsteps silent as she paused by her children's room. They slept peacefully, untouched by the storm inside their mother's mind. Downstairs, she left a note on the table, straightened a few objects, small gestures that felt like her final attempt at order. Then she turned on the oven, sealing every crack and door with meticulous care. The hiss of gas filled the silence. There was no panic, no struggle, just a quiet surrender. Kneeling before the open oven, Sylvia placed her head inside and embraced the stillness. In that moment, she crossed from pain to peace, leaving behind words that would outlive her. Her haunting line from Lady Lazarus became prophecy. Dying is an art, like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. What once sounded like poetry became the echo of a woman who mastered both creation and destruction. The tragic genius of Sylvia Plath. Capital Steez. Capital Steez. He was born Jamal Dewar. The world knew him as Capital Steez. A lyrical prodigy, a rising force in the Beast Coast movement. His rhymes cut sharp. His words carried wisdom beyond his years. Yet behind every verse hid a storm he could never calm. Beneath the glow of his growing fame, a darkness quietly took root, one that no applause could drown out. It was Christmas Eve, 2012. From the rooftop of the Cinematic Music Group building, Steez stood alone, gazing across Manhattan's glittering skyline. The city below pulsed with life, laughter, lights, holiday joy. But in his eyes, it was all fading. A Bible trembled in his hands, pages fluttering in the cold December wind. He traced the verses, searching for something, redemption, peace, meaning, but the words blurred into silence. Flashes of his childhood played through his mind like fragments of an old film reel. A father who left, a broken home, long Brooklyn nights where pain was masked behind poetry. His genius took him far, but could never fill the emptiness that followed him everywhere. Messages of Merry Christmas lit up his phone, hollow echoes from people who never truly saw the hurt behind his smile. At 11:59 p.m., he typed two chilling words, the end. Minutes later, he stepped forward into the night. The world below was a blur of neon and noise, but all he heard was the wind, and then silence. Capital Steez's death left a haunting question that still lingers. Was it the weight of the industry or the ghosts of his past that pulled him into the abyss? Tonight, we've journeyed through the luminous yet heartbreaking lives of 15 black geniuses. Artists, athletes, and visionaries who changed the world, yet carried unbearable pain beneath their brilliance. From Donny Hathaway's tragic leap to Capital Steez clutching a Bible on a cold Christmas Eve, these are not just stories of loss. They're reflections of the unseen wounds our society too often ignores. Which story moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow as we continue uncovering the hidden pain, brilliance, and heartbreak behind the legends who burned too bright, too soon.